Thomas
Dayan
Marlowe
asker.
had made this
Seni
trip
buradan çıkaracağım.
43 times without incident, which meant the
Gözlerini aç.
plasma rifles pointed at his chest represented a significant statistical deviation. The border checkpoint had always been tedious, Valcori guards inspecting manifests with the enthusiasm of people deeply bored with their assignments, but never violent, until today. The lead guard, his neck ridges decorated with ceremonial scars that suggested rank or achievement Thomas didn't understand, refused to even look at the credentials Thomas offered. Instead, he said something in guttural Valcori that made the other guards laugh. Thomas's translator, a cheap civilian model that struggled with idioms, caught fragments. Human filth, collaborator, teach respect. There's been a mistake, Thomas said, keeping his voice level. My manifest is current, medical supplies for civilian sectors. I have authorization. Armored hands shoved him hard against his transport's hull. The impact drove air from his lungs, and before he could recover, the distinctive whine of charging plasma rifles filled the air. Thomas's mind raced through options. Compliance had always worked before, but these guards weren't following any protocol he recognized. Through the adrenaline flooding his system, Thomas noticed movement from the command building. Another Valcori female, her armor marked with insignia more elaborate than standard military issue. She moved with purpose, her elongated ears angled forward in what his limited understanding suggested was intense focus. The guards hadn't noticed her yet, too invested in whatever lesson they planned to teach. Thomas's hands were pressed against cold metal, his heart hammering against his ribs, and he wondered distantly if anyone would even investigate when a human contractor turned up dead at an occupation checkpoint. The female soldier was closer now, perhaps 10 meters away. Something in her expression made Thomas think every assumption he'd made about this situation was about to be completely wrong. The lead guard raised his fist, and Thomas braced for impact he couldn't avoid. Then a single word in Valcori cracked across the checkpoint like a plasma discharge, and everything stopped. Every guard froze mid-motion. The female soldier stood 3 meters away, and despite being outnumbered 5-1, she radiated the kind of authority that made numbers irrelevant. She repeated the word, slower, and Thomas's struggling translator rendered it somewhere between cease and death consequence. The lead guard turned, clearly ready to dismiss whoever was interrupting his entertainment. His expression transformed when he saw her face. The ceremonial scars went visibly pale. He dropped into a submissive crouch, head lowered, and the other guards scrambled to follow. Thomas, still pressed against his transport, watched the power dynamics invert completely. The female soldier, her name patch read something his translator butchered as Kaira, spoke in clipped, formal Valcori. Thomas caught fragments. Jurisdiction violation, diplomatic protocols, summary execution authorization. The guards responded in voices stripped of their earlier cruelty, offering explanations that Kaira cut off with dismissive gestures. She turned to Thomas, and her amber eyes assessed him with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously threatened and protected. "You are unharmed." Her English was accented but precise, far better than his translator managed. Thomas managed a nod, not trusting his voice. Kaira issued more commands. The guards began backing away with visible reluctance and unmistakable fear. To Thomas, she said, "Your manifest, show me." He fumbled with his datapad, hands shaking, pulling up the supply records. She scanned them quickly, her expression unreadable. "Medical supplies for civilian sectors." "Yes, ma'am, just routine." "Nothing is routine now." She returned his datapad. "These guards violated direct orders. The ceasefire agreements prohibit harassment of certified humanitarian transports." Thomas blinked. He'd assumed the guards were acting within some Valcori authority structure. They were breaking your laws. They were indulging prejudice. "It is not permitted." Kaira's tone suggested this was both obvious and personally offensive. "I don't understand. If you have rules against." "Rules exist. Enforcement is inconsistent when humans are involved. She glanced at the retreating guards. Some believe occupation justifies cruelty. They are incorrect. Thomas's brain was still catching up to not being dead. Who are you? Kaira's ears angled slightly. Amusement, maybe. Someone whose rank makes disobedience inadvisable. Come, we have complications to discuss. She walked toward the command building, clearly expecting him to follow. Thomas, still processing that he'd apparently been seconds from execution, decided following the terrifying alien soldier was probably his safest option. The Valcori command center hummed with technology Thomas only partially understood. Holographic displays showing border sectors, communication arrays, automated defense grids that probably could have vaporized his transport before he'd known they existed. Kaira led him to a side office and sealed the door. You come here often, she said, not a question. Weekly, sometimes twice depending on supply needs. Thomas's heart rate was finally stabilizing. I've never had trouble before. You would not, I ensured it. That stopped him completely. What? Kaira's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement. You think your transports pass through occupied territory by luck. Your medical supplies reach civilian zones because no one questions them. I authorized your routes, personally. Thomas struggled to process this. Why would you? I'm just a contractor, a nobody hauling antibiotics and painkillers. You provide medicine to humans in zones where our occupation prevents normal distribution. You do not smuggle weapons or propaganda. You complain about bureaucracy but follow protocols. She tilted her head, ears angling in what he was learning to read as genuine curiosity. You are useful. Why would I not protect useful things? Things, persons, Kaira corrected, and something in her tone suggested the distinction actually mattered to her. Apologies, translation error. The office felt smaller suddenly. Thomas had spent months assuming he survived through insignificance, careful mediocrity that kept him beneath notice. Learning someone had been actively shielding him reframed every close call, every checkpoint that had waved him through. Those guards today acted without knowledge of my protection, a communication failure on my part. It will not happen again. Kaira pulled up files on her display, Thomas's complete transport history, every route, every delivery. You may continue your work with formal authorization now. No more miscommunications. Thomas should have thanked her and left. Instead, he asked, Who are you, really? Those guards looked like you could have executed them on the spot. Kaira's amber eyes met his directly. Someone who believes occupation requires honor, not cruelty. Someone whose rank makes that belief actionable. She paused. Someone who will have enemies for today's intervention. The weight of that hung between them. She'd protected him at political cost, and they both knew it. Why? Thomas asked quietly. Because small rebellions against cruelty are the only honor left in this assignment, Kaira said. And because you asked that question, instead of simply accepting the advantage. 3 weeks later, Thomas's transport broke down in a contested zone, and Kaira arrived personally with a repair unit before he'd finished running diagnostics. She bypassed 3 layers of military protocol to reach him, which suggested the political cost she'd mentioned was still accumulating. You could get in serious trouble for this, Thomas said, watching her diagnose his engine failure with the efficiency of someone who'd done mechanical work long before she'd commanded military operations. Already in trouble, today's enemies include senior command who believe humans should be managed through fear, not protocols. She didn't look up from the engine. They see my protection of you as weakness. Is it? She smiled, sharp and genuine. No, it is strategy. Fear creates resistance. Fairness creates stability, but they do not understand strategy, only dominance. The engine hummed back to life under her hands. Thomas hesitated, then asked the question that had been building since their first conversation. Why tell me this? Why trust me? Kaira straightened, meeting his eyes. Because you asked. Because you see me as person, not just occupier. Because, she paused, ears angling in what he now recognized as vulnerability. Because I am tired of being alone in believing we can be better than our worst orders. Thomas understood then. This wasn't just about supply runs or political maneuvering. They'd found something unexpected in each other, proof that connection could survive conflict, that individuals could choose differently than their nations demanded. Around them, the occupied territory sprawled in all its complicated tension. War machines on distant horizons, checkpoints dividing communities, the slow grind of military bureaucracy processing human lives as administrative problems. What happens now? Thomas asked. Kaira closed the engine panel. Now you continue your work, I continue mine, and we see if small rebellions matter. She extended her hand, a human gesture she'd clearly learned deliberately. Thomas took it, feeling the warmth of her palm, the implicit promise of alliance against systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of trust. They'll come after you eventually, Thomas said. Your enemies. Probably, but I have recent experience with intervening in unequal confrontations. Her grip tightened briefly, and I find I prefer choosing my own honor over accepting theirs. Thomas climbed back into his transport, supplies secured, engine running smoothly. In his mirror, he watched Kaira return to her military vehicle, her armor catching the harsh sunlight, her posture suggesting someone who'd made peace with the consequences of choosing compassion over cruelty. He had 47 more supply runs scheduled. And now, unexpectedly, he had an ally who'd proven that authority could be wielded for protection instead of domination. The checkpoint ahead waved him through without inspection. The guards wouldn't meet his eyes. Small rebellions, Kaira had said. Thomas drove toward the civilian zones, carrying medicine and the strange hope that maybe small rebellions could accumulate into something that mattered.